I'm going to bring up our author, Isha. Hello, dear Isha.
Hi, Laura.
So Isha is a mom. We might just get to see a newborn. It's kind of fun. One of the women in our book became a grandmother for I think the first time during the process. And Isha birthed her second baby while just a month ago.
Close to 2 months ago.
Oh, it doesn't
Yeah,
feel
less
like
than two
that.
months.
2 months ago. Wow. Okay. So Isha's chapter is Fertility as a Portal. From proving and fear to surrender, inner authority and trust. Fertility as a portal. And she's certainly shown herself to be quite fertile. We get to see a photo of her very pregnant here in the book. This is about Isha Julka, MBA. Isha Julka, MBA, is a speaker, author, and leadership coach who helps high achieving women who look successful on paper but are quietly paying the price with their health succeed without sacrificing their ambition. For years, she lived in a cycle of doing more and pushing harder, believing success would finally make her feel like enough. But as her drive grew, so did the toll on her body. Unexplained symptoms, misdiagnoses, pregnancy, loss. Just want to breathe with that one. It's a hard one, and deep exhaustion. Her healing journey led her to understand that these symptoms were not random but signals. Real healing began when she learned to slow down, feel safe again in her body, and trust herself again. Today, Isha works with women who look successful on the outside but feel the cost internally with anxiety, unexplained symptoms, and fatigue. She helps them regulate their nervous system, shift deep-rooted patterns, and rebuild trust with their bodies so they can succeed without pressure and finally feel at home in themselves. Beautiful. Thank you so much. So, my dear, you write for somebody who was probably like you were, somebody who looks successful on paper but is paying for it. If you could talk to us about who you wrote this story for and maybe even who you were before you went on your healing journey.
Yeah, I think for me, when I was living that life of constant proving, I didn't realize, what the underlying thought process was that was driving me to be that way. It took, it took me being on this path of healing, not just from like chronic symptoms that I talk about in my chapter, but when I was forced to quit my job back in 2023, I literally couldn't recognize myself. And that's when, all these thoughts that had been governing my life, for almost 40 years surfaced. And these same thoughts that were pushing me to be so driven and so passionate and, that I had to constantly prove myself with how much output I was giving
Yeah.
kind of were becoming the source of sadness for me because I couldn't prove myself anymore. So I think for me, I write this book for all the women. It could be output in terms of career. I think that's where I was coming from in my journey. But I know even looking at, my, thinking about my mom, my grandmas, and, all my aunts and so on and so forth in my family, I feel like women from a very young age have been told that to measure their existence with how much they are giving, how much they are contributing. And so much so that I remember as I was, writing this chapter, there were times as a little girl I would really experience how if I were to sit still or, be just sitting there doing nothing, it was almost like I felt uncomfortable in my skin, even as a little girl. And I remember, like, even till date, sometimes I've heard my mom say that, well, the more you move, the better it is. Like, if you're sitting still or idle is considered unproductive. So it's like women have always associated their value with how productive they have been. And I see that because I've seen, women in my own family struggle as a result. Like they have been from dawn to dusk, they don't stop.
Cooking, taking care
Yeah,
of the
it could be
kids,
anything. It could be kids, it
working.
could be house, it could be kitchen, it could be just, there's like the list of things to do until they hit the bed in the night. And I see that, even with my own mom, like she wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning and it's like, okay, what can I get done? Until she hits the bed at, because she's so exhausted at 8 o'clock. She has, her body's like, okay, we're done. So I think this process has made me really curious about studying people and, why do they behave the way they behave? After I studied myself and went really deep into why I was the way I was. So I've heard from a few friends that read my chapter,
Hmm.
and one of my friends back in back in school days, who's literally known me the longest, I would say for almost 3 decades, and she thought that we had kind of separated or grown apart in the last decade or decade and a half. She read my chapter, and it kind of gave her a synopsis of what was going on in my life in that time. And she just poured her heart into a text message. And she's like, thank you for writing this story because I can see myself in this. Like it was
Oh,
all about our grades. It was all about doing more and, accomplishing more. And I think that's the gift that the story is still giving me. That I've been able to connect with people at a much deeper level. A friend that I thought I had lost and we were never going to connect again
oh,
reached out, and she was moved by my story, and she actually apologized because she thought that we had grown apart because of something she had done. But then she realized it was never about her. It was all about my healing and how my life was unfolding. And I had to take time for myself to like, distance from things and handle what was going on.
oh, interesting. Yeah, and I think, these all of these stories are so vulnerable, and you put so many personal details in it that it does inspire our friends to be vulnerable back. So that's beautiful. So let's talk about your title, Fertility as Portal, right? So there's the literal fertility of you were trying to have a second child. Your first child is now 9, and you
Yeah.
were trying to get pregnant again and having a really difficult time and went through, I believe it was IVF. No, just
No,
just having a
not,
baby. There was a
yeah.
miscarriage. So let's just talk in general about this piece of fertility and how that was a transformational gateway for you, a portal.
Yeah, I think when the miscarriage happened, it was also, that was a time when I really had to learn. That was the first out of many steps that I had to really learn to like surrender. Because I think my life had all been about constantly proving myself, and my body was trying to keep up with me. When I went through that miscarriage, I felt like that was like the final, full stop where I couldn't outperform what my body was saying. Like I had to sit with myself. And that wasn't easy for a person who was always on the go 24/7. Like I couldn't perform and feel good about myself by getting pregnant. It was beyond my control. So I had to learn to live with it. And that was a big eye opener, or like a big awakening moment for who I had to become. I know personally in my friend circle, in my family of women uh, who've had similar challenges of, getting pregnant and, having a family of their own. And I feel like there's a lot of taboo and a lot of shame and guilt that women carry with themselves for years, and they never talk about it.
Mm,
Um, and, I was like, why is that? Why do we take everything as our own responsibility? Like it was something broken in my body that caused it to be this way. So I really had to, I think for me, the story was about really coming face to face with that shame and guilt, because I do talk about it, what that did to me and how I was carrying that shame and guilt for so many years. And I literally became a person that I couldn't even recognize. Like I couldn't even stand in front of the mirror. I talk about that. I think it's time where we start looking at miscarriage or loss or like infertility as just your body as a way to like protect you and not something that is broken in you. You know, the fact that when you're born, especially a girl, you know, you're born with the ability to reproduce, even as a baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the label infertile to me is like incorrect. You were never infertile. You were born to be fertile. You know, you every child, every girl, you know, is born with the eggs.
Yeah.
So it's like it's just a misnomer in my eyes.
Hmm.
So I feel like for me the journey was taking that label out of. I don't even like to use the word infertile, you know, when I write because I'm like that's a wrong label. I do not agree with it. Fertility challenges, yes, I can stand behind that, but I cannot I cannot
Sure,
stand behind
sure,
infertile,
sure.
you know. So I think for me, this journey is really talking to all these women who I am carrying in my heart, who are struggling, you know, to bring their child into their physical lives. For me, it's very personal, um, and I didn't mention this in the chapter because you know there was word limitation. Maybe you know for my future book, but one of the women who really held space for me when I was going through, you know, the grief and the sadness of losing my child while trying to get pregnant again. Um, I reached out to her or her practice when I found out I was pregnant again. And I had learned that they are doing like monthly women's circles. And I was like, oh, I want to go to those circles and share my story. Like it took us almost 5 years, but it finally happened as a message of hope, you know, for the women who are struggling. Um, and the person who shares the practice with her, she told me, no, the women are not ready. And that just broke my heart. And literally my heart sank in that moment. I'm like, what do you mean the women are not ready? Um, and in that moment, I was like, okay, my message of bringing hope to women cannot wait for a person's approval.
Right.
I had, I'm like, universe, give me a way to bring this message out. And I kid you not, within, like I set that intention in the evening, and next day morning, I get a text from Crystal, who's on Zoom today, and she's like, "Have you been considering writing?" And I'm like, yes." And then she introduced me to you when you were, you know, looking for authors for Radiant Wisdom. So I think my story um, made into this book, it was a divine intervention. I did not know you, you know, before Radiant Wisdom, and it was like universe's way of bringing me in your community so I could offer the story, you know,
Wow.
as a call that I was like, I
Wow.
cannot let people decide whether or not this story is meant to be shared or not. I know women who need this story.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you, Crystal, for that introduction. And Isha, you know, since you do really do want to be a hope for other women who maybe are caught in people pleasing or overwork, what recommendations do you have? What does the path forward look like for them?
Um, I think one thing that I really want to bring up is your worth was never supposed to be earned. You know, there's in my own becoming, you know, as I was, you know, as I was healing from, you know, the life of constant proving and overworking myself to the ground, I had a moment when I was journaling when something came out of me and really has stayed with me since. Like, a diamond is a diamond even before it's discovered. So I want women to feel like those sparkly diamonds in the rough. A diamond doesn't wait to be, put into a necklace to feel worthy. So in the same way, women don't have to perform in order to feel like, yeah, because I'm performing, I am giving something, people will love me or people will respect me. You are worthy of everyone's love and everything just the way you are, just like a diamond.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So anything else you want to, any closing words of wisdom or any question I didn't ask you that you wanted to be asked?
Um, no, I think it's been a great journey. I had a friend text me just the other day and she's like, you need to write more. Um, and I'm like, yes, I believe even like when I read my chapter, there's a lot that didn't make it to the chapter, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, yes, I know there's a book in me somewhere. I don't know exactly what would go into it, but I know everything that I wanted to write in the chapter and couldn't make it. So what I want to say is you'll be surprised, the gentle nudges that you get that I had been getting about writing for almost a year before Radiant Wisdom happened or came to me in my life. I had been getting these gentle nudges for over a year and I didn't quite know what to make of it. And I'm like, write a book, write a book. Okay, but what am I supposed to write? So my my last message to women would be, um, you know, pay attention to those gentle nudges because
Mm,
that's your path. That's your soul path,
mm,
calling you.
mhm.
It may not make sense logically because I know for me, there's always, a logical side that always wants to question. But putting logic aside, I think this for me was very, very personal and intentional because this was not about me. This was very selfless, thinking about all those women who are struggling with fertility and other health issues.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, let's put some love into the chat for Isha. Let her know what you're taking from her story that she's shared here. Isla's given you some hearts. Crystal, our bodies are always protecting us. I love this. Thank you. Michelle, thank you for your vulnerability and sharing how you came to this place of witnessing the patterns which created disconnection for you and the inability to simply be based on cultural and familial conditioning. Michelle, having also experienced infertility, and she's putting that in quotes, before having my son, I very much relate to what you have shared, celebrating you with both the birth of your child and this chapter. I love that. Donette, Isha, thank you for sharing with such poise and genuineness and the reminder that we are each valuable as our own authentic selves. Betty, Isha, what a beautiful message of how we are all worthy just the way we are. I so appreciate your vulnerability in sharing your journey. Love it. Diane says, thank you, each of you, for your beautiful words. Love to you. All right. Well, thank you so much. Let's give a namaste and a bow to Isha. Hyla says, thank you for your vulnerable share. I love the diamond metaphor. All right. Okay. Sonia, thank you for your intelligence, brilliance, and exploring your personal need that also apply to everyone. Okay.